Hello, my name's Antonio, and welcome to the inaugural video of DM's Dungeon. This is going to be my new channel, delving into my experiences in Dungeons & Dragons and tabletop role-playing in general as a relatively new player slash DM. Now, I'm going to have a few videos come up here real quick, and they're just going to explain who I am, my experience at the tabletop role-playing, and so forth, and what my goal for this channel is going to be. I'm going to break it up a little bit, probably, because it's probably a really boring video for a lot of you, and I'm sure not everyone is going to be interested in all that stuff. As I said, my name's Antonio, and I am someone who started playing Dungeons & Dragons, specifically at first, a few years ago, back in 2015, right after 5th edition came out. I was initially got re-interested in tabletop role-playing because of a lot of the actual play podcasts and YouTube channels, specifically the comedic ones, ones like the Adventure Zone, Nerd Poker, Critical Role, ones that bring talented, funny people together who can really get into character and so forth, and have fun with it. Like a lot of people, I was first exposed to tabletop role-playing in my youth. I would go to the local friendly board game shop, and that sold Magic and had bunches of RPG books, and I would often spend a lot of time looking at the books and talking to the employees there about RPGs. But again, this was before YouTube, before broadband, to date myself a little bit. People definitely had 56K modems in my youth and did not do a lot of video watching online. Anyways, so it was hard. It made it hard to get into it. Kind of the classic thing a lot of players talk about. But I would hear these employees of the store talk about what they had done in these games, and my interest grew and grew. I eventually got the core rulebook for the original Robotech game, and I devoured that, and I finally started to realize how these books of numbers and tables equated to a game. But alas, I couldn't find anyone to play with me. And I was a little too shy to ask those people at the friendly local game store. So it kind of passed into the background of my mind for a number of years. New edition of D&D started to gain popularity, and board games in general started to gain popularity. And this is around 2012, 2013, and I started to get much more into board games again, and kind of this new wave of board games, with your Fantasy Flight games and all that sort of stuff. After a couple years of that, obviously, those two worlds are very tied together, so I started to re-indulge myself in this tabletop role-playing interest of mine, and I started reading up on things more, reading up about Dungeons & Dragons, kind of what I missed, or in my opinion didn't miss, with 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons, and so forth, and I decided I was going to make the plunge, and I got the D&D starter set. I think I was pretty quick on that. I got it right around, or maybe even right before, actually, the Player's Handbook even came out. So it was still new, and I devoured Lost Minds of Phandelver Adventure. I read it a couple times, I made characters, and finally I decided I was going to make the plunge. If I couldn't find a group that really wanted to play my style, I had learned enough about tabletop role-playing games to know that DMs are the ones that are in demand, and decided, hell, I'm going to do it myself. And I just made it very clear to everyone that I was a first-time DM and so forth, and I had an amazing time. And that was, I believe that was right around 2015. And Since then, I have DM'd a couple of campaigns and a few one-shots. I have watched hundreds of hours of YouTube videos on this. I have, the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master Guide, Xanathar's Guide to Everything, the Monster Manual, multiple modules for D&D. I've got the Esper Genesis. I've got other stuff, Ultramodern 5, the Pathfinder book, Call of Cthulhu, 7th edition book. My interest has really, really taken off. And that is me, I guess. That is mainly what you need to know about my tabletop background and gaming. Now, the other part of this is I do have a lot of experience with board games and other types of gaming. I have a pretty big board game collection, somewhere around 60. And I know a lot about games. I love games. I've always loved games, whether it's a video game, a board game, a card game, what have you. I've always played them, and I've always had an interest in the, I wouldn't say mechanics, but how they play and what makes games fun, which probably is mechanics, but anyways. On top of that, I have always been an art lover, and a creative, I guess, lover, a lover of creative media. And so I have always been really attached to storytelling. And I spent time in AP classes studying, in high school studying literature. I took film study courses in college, and obviously I almost went for an English minor. Not bragging, sorry, none of that means anything for the record. The moral of that is just I've spent time studying things like story structure, what makes a good story. And I'm just explaining that because that's the combination of things that I'm coming in here with. I'm kind of new. I'm not someone that played 2nd edition, that, went through the trials of 3rd edition becoming 3.5 and so forth. I'm kind of fresh. I'm not jaded, but I love the idea of tabletop role-playing games and what they can do. Or what they can be, I should say, and do for the player. There are things you can do that you can't do in anything else, things you can make happen. And often it blows my mind thinking about some of the amazing stuff that can happen in a really fun tabletop role-playing game. Again, combine that with a love of games, a study of stories and the types of media that stories are told through, and mix that all together to my personal mindset that not only is Dungeons & Dragons a game, it's a cooperative storytelling experience. And I think that pretty much sums up my viewpoint and what my perspective is going to be, or is, and the perspective that this channel is going to be viewing things, issues, and so forth through. All right, next I am going to drop a video about some of the other things I'm going to talk about, and part of the basics of what I think make tabletop role-playing so interesting and so exciting for new players. Thanks a bunch for joining me. Again, I am Antonio, and I hope to see you again in the DM's Dungeon.